Good morning and welcome to a high-level overview of graduated licensing and the last phase of conditional licensing. For those of you that don't know me, I'm one of RECA's regulatory compliance advisors, and my role is to assist brokers and managers with the interpretation and application of the Real Estate Act and rules, and to help solve problems that come up from time to time. I've also been the main staff person assisting in the implementation of condominium management licensing and the more recent development of graduated licensing. This session, just to remind you, is being recorded. So I'm pleased to present the launch of the graduated licensing program on behalf of the Residential Property Management Industry Council. I will also be discussing the end of the conditional licensing for condominium managers. These are the main topic areas here on the slide that I'll be covering. Please enter any questions you may have into the Q&A, and I will respond to you after the presentation portion of the webinar. And I would ask that anybody that hasn't muted themselves to please mute themselves. And when we get to the question and answer, we can either take questions that have been done in the Q&A, or we can deal with questions that people want to just raise their hand and ask. I'm good either way. Just a comment that the graduated licensing, I think, is a pretty straightforward program. The more complicated things that we'll be talking about today is actually the phasing out of the conditional licensing and some other issues around that. So this session is your opportunity to ask questions, so don't be shy about that when we get to the Q&A. So the options for a person entering the condominium management industry as of October 1st, they will have two options. One is they can just do the traditional completion of all the courses and exams, so the fundamentals and practice courses and exams after they've had their eligibility approved. And then once they complete that, they would get an unrestricted license.
Doug, you're muted.
Doug, you're muted. Doug, you got muted. I can't hear you.
Doug, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we could. Yeah. Now
okay. Good. Thanks.
All right, Doug. Awesome.
So the other option starting October 1st, of course, will be the graduated licensing program. So somebody who wants to get into the industry in a more gradual way and spread out the coursework and exams and, of course, the expense can do that under graduated licensing. They would first complete eligibility as they would in a normal application, obtain a criminal record check, and then they'd be issued a restricted license. So the license would have very specific restrictions tied to what they could do at the level 1 and the level 2. And I'll come back to those restrictions in a little bit. So it's an opportunity for people to enter the industry in a little more staggered way. We've had requests from the property management industry in the past to look at something similar, but just due to what's happened over the last several years, that hasn't been possible. So it was decided by the industry council that they would do this pilot program with conditional license or graduated licensing for condo managers to start. And if the program works well, then it's expected to be moved and expanded into other areas that we license. So, why is graduated licensing happening? Well, in both property management and condominium management, as most of you know, there's a shortage of people to work as condominium managers. One of the other concerns that many people have is the high upfront costs for courses, exams, and the licensing fees. It's a little different in the condo management and property management industry in that people work as a staff person or an employee, whereas when people enter the real estate industry, they're typically on commission sales, and all the expenses are their own personal expenses. So this is hopefully going to help people or brokerages be able to recruit more people into the industry. So like I said, the high cost of courses, exams, licensing fees, etc., are spread out more. But the bigger picture, I think, is that applicants, new people coming into the industry, if they've never worked anywhere in the property management world or worked as an assistant or an administrator in the condominium world, then they don't really understand what your business is all about. And as you know, not everybody's suited for it. So it gives applicants a chance to sort of ease into the industry and see if it's something that fits for them. At the same time, brokers get to assess them and decide, is this person suitable for working with us and representing our brokerage and providing condominium management services. So there's a number of pluses to going forward with graduated licensing. Now, what happens is they get the restricted license subject to them completing these specific courses and exams within certain time frames. The person must complete the graduated licensing program. If they fail to complete it and then come back 6 months, a year, or 3 years later and want to restart it, they cannot. Once they've been entered into a graduated licensing program once, that's it. If they fail to complete it fully, then they would have to, at any time that they decide to get licensed again, they would have to first complete the courses and exams and get licensed before they could actually practice. So the other thing is when they apply for their graduated license in the system through RECA, they will actually have to click off an acknowledgement and agree to the restrictions on their license. At the same time, when the broker is hiring that person and you're going through the hiring licensing process on RECA, of course, it's those of you that our brokers know how it works, that it's kind of a to and fro thing, that part of it's done by the applicant, part of it's done by the broker. So when it comes back to the broker, when the applicant's portion is finished, the broker will have to acknowledge that this person is applying with a graduated license and that there are restrictions involved as to what they can do, and that the broker is agreeing that they will ensure that proper supervision is carried out. So it's a two-step process that both the applicant and the broker have to agree to the graduated license process, the restrictions involved, what the person can and cannot do, and that the broker or their delegate will provide adequate supervision. So this is what, in simple form, what the graduated licensing steps are. So a person would make the normal eligibility application and get approval for that, and it's just the same as it would be for a regular license at that stage. But once they're approved, they would be issued under the graduated licensing program a restricted license, and they would enter level 1. And during level 1, they would have 1 year to complete the fundamentals of condominium management course and exam. So if they finish it sooner, there's nothing stopping them from finishing it sooner. If they should finish it in 3 months or 6 months, once they've completed the exam, then that ends level 1. And then they move on to level 2, which gives them an additional year to complete the practice of condominium management and the exam. And then once they complete the exam successfully in level 2, whether it takes the full year or, as I said, with level 1, whether they finish it earlier, as soon as they successfully complete the exam in level 2, they would then be issued an unrestricted license. So it's a really quite simple process as far as the licensing is concerned. And as I said before, if this process doesn't get completed in the way it's laid out in that 2 years process, then when the person decides to restart their getting their license, they would have to complete condominium fundamentals and practices of condominium management and the exams before being able to get licensed and practice again. So it's very important that they understand that they just can't stop it and re-enter it again. So you'll find on our website the activities that they can do. So I'm going to just flip fairly quickly through a number of slides here that just show the different types of activities. So you'll see on this slide, there's condo board meetings and AGM meetings activities, and you'll see others as I go through the slides. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see they're color-coded. So the blue indicates the activity has to be supervised either by the broker or a delegate. A delegate could be another licensed condo manager, experienced condo manager. The green indicates, yes, they can carry out that activity without supervision, typically after the broker or the delegate is sure that they're capable of doing that. And then the orange, which is no, that just flat out, they cannot carry out that activity. So all the activities are listed for level 1. And as you go, if you look on the website, you'll see these there. So you'll see there's management service agreements, miscellaneous, condo unit owners, dealing with late contributions, bylaw and rules enforcement, service providers, financial, and then some general issues that don't fall specifically into any of those categories. So it's quite detailed. And then also on the website, it goes through level 2. I won't go through all of them. This is just a quick sample of what the start of level 2 looks like. But what I've done here is I've put the 2 slides for, on the left is the level 1 and on the right is level 2 for the same activities. So you can see under, for instance, condo board meetings, that there's all the activities are supervised except for one, which they cannot do. Whereas in level 2, now there are only 2 activities that they have to be supervised in, and there's 3 different activities that they can carry out on their own. And the activity that they couldn't be involved with before is now a supervised activity. So it moves them along as they get more experience and more sort of into the flow of the business of your brokerage. And that's the same if you look through level 2, you'll see those changes throughout the level 2. So what happens when I mentioned when a person gets licensed and there's restrictions on their license, so they would first get a restricted license at the level 1, and that approval for a restricted license will link to this chart for level 1 activities. So it'll specify what activities they are capable of doing on their own or with supervision, or that they cannot do at all in level 1. Then when they graduate to level 2, the restrictions on their license changes to the ones detailed in the level 2 tables. So so each piece all sort of connects together for them. Now, there are quite a few activities, of course, when we were going with the committee, or the council going through this whole project, are activities that don't require a license. But we've included them with the information about the levels, because our recommendation is that a condo manager should be familiar with all these unlicensed activities and know how to do them. Now, it won't be a problem in a very small brokerage because they may have to do them anyways because they don't have the amount of support staff that there may be in a larger brokerage. But the philosophy behind this, that they should do this, is they know how the pieces fit together. They can answer questions, whether they get answered a question by a board member or by a unit owner. I give an example. So the first one on this list is registering documents with land titles. Well, most people in their life before becoming a condo manager have probably never ever even been on spin at land titles and registered anything. So as a condo manager, they should understand what's involved in registering a document. So you have your Form 8, for instance, that has to get registered for every condo complex every year after the AGM. So yes, an administrator can do that, but as a broker, you should have a new person do that a couple of times initially, just so they understand the process and they're comfortable with it. And that goes with all the activities that are there. Now, we are going to be over the next 6 weeks transitioning from the conditional licensing, where all the people who got licensed back as of December 1st of 2021 have moved forward. And some people have removed conditions from their license, others haven't. And then we have people who are getting licensed. And I believe we're up to actually 70 or 80 new people, brand new to the condominium management industry, that have either completed licensing through the regular process or in the process of doing it now. So there is a large number of people coming in since October 1st of last year. Now, there are going to be some students that are currently enrolled, either they've gone through the eligibility process and they're either enrolled in the fundamentals of condominium management, or they're enrolled in the practice of condominium management if they've completed fundamentals. So if they're in that process and they still are in that process when it comes to October 1st, they have a choice. They can complete their licensing requirements as they're already proceeding. And once they've completed the courses and exams, they can just simply get their license and then work for a brokerage. But if they choose to move to the graduated licensing process, so let's say they've just started, they haven't progressed very far on the fundamentals course as yet, and they decide that they would prefer to move into the graduated licensing process, they will be able to do that. But it's not available until after October 1st. And we're actually asking people, if there's anybody on this call that's in that situation, or a broker that has people in that situation, we're asking that you hold off until the second week of October to make that change. As those of you that have been licensed with RECA for some time know what September is like with us for renewals. We will have over 18,000 renewals taking place, of which probably 40 or 50% of them will happen in the last 2 weeks of September. People will do it in advance. So it's very stressful on our system and our staff. So to make sure a change like this, for somebody to change from the standard enrollment over to graduated licensing, please wait till the second week of October. So now I'm going to move on to talk about the conditional licensing. So as I mentioned before, conditional licensing expires on September 30th. It applies to all the people that got licensed initially when licensing of condominium managers first started. So everybody that got licensed conditionally was licensed somewhere between December 1st and I believe February 3rd, in that 2 months and a bit. So depending on whether they were licensed before or not, they have conditions on their license. So the people that were licensed previously were given a waiver on the fundamentals course, and anybody that was an associate broker or a broker previously were given a waiver on their broker program course. So the people that were licensed, whether it be real estate or property management previously, the only course requirement they had, an exam requirement, was the practices of condominium management. However, with people who have never been licensed with RECA previously and are coming into a regulated environment new, if they were an associate, they had fundamentals and practices to complete. And if they were a broker or an associate broker, they had fundamentals, practices, and the broker program to complete. So people have been working at that at different rates. We've seen some brokerages be extremely good at mentoring their staff and getting them through the process. So many of the brokerages that have 15, 20 plus people virtually have all their staff done. I know that I looked at the 3 largest brokerages, and each of them only has, out of 20 some people, 3 or 4 people with 1 or 2 pieces missing. So we congratulate the brokerages that have made an effort to assist their staff and get this moving along so they're not stuck in September up against the deadline. Now, as I said, September 30th is the deadline for the conditions. So when licenses are renewed as of October 1st, any conditional licenses that existed previously will change. So there'll be downgrading in some cases, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail on each of the different licenses. But that means, for instance, somebody that may have a conditional associate broker's license may be downgraded to an associate. If you want to prevent those types of things from happening, or from you not being able to get a license at all, then you need to complete the the conditions on your license, whether it's one or more courses or one or more exams, prior to October 1st. And I stress that if you have still something to complete, there can be a delay a week to 2 weeks to get a slot at an exam center, particularly if you're looking for an exam center close to yourself, without having to travel across the city, further distance, or even to another location outside of your hometown to get a slot for doing the exam. So I stress for people, you should try to get your courses at the very least done in August, and that will give you September to deal with exams. But the sooner you get it done, then the less risk there is of you not making the deadline. So I'll speak to brokers first. So any brokers that have conditions as of September 30th, if they have any conditions on their license, they will not be able to renew as a broker. The options on the next slide that I'll discuss will be the options they have. And then like I said, if they're not complete, their options will be to find a replacement broker. So if you have an associate broker that's got all their requirements met, for instance, at your brokerage, then they could be moved into the broker position until the broker completes their requirements. Or at the very worst, it could mean closing of the brokerage until the broker has met the requirements. So it's quite serious. But there's been almost 2 years, by the time we get to September 1st, would just be a couple months shy of 2 years for these requirements to have been met. So I'm going to go into some detail on the broker's license. So there's 3 different scenarios that can happen. So the blue box, if the broker has not completed any of the requirements, they have the option of entering into level 1 of graduated licensing. They would complete the fundamentals course at exam. They would then enter level 2 once they've got fundamentals done and complete the practices course and exam. Then they would then have an unrestricted license as an associate. So what we're seeing here is that somebody who's fully qualified as a broker currently, as of October 1st, if they haven't completed the requirements, they will be downgraded into the graduated licensing program and not even be able to do a lot of basic things. They end up having to follow the activity schedule that I just covered for level 1 and level 2. Once they would complete level 1 and level 2, they would have it, as I said, an unrestricted associate license issued, and then they could complete the broker program and exam. And once they have that done, they would obtain an unrestricted associate broker license and can reapply for the broker's license. So that's if nothing is done. And I can say there's only a couple people that are in that case that I'm aware of, and they are closing their brokerages or merging with another brokerage. So the second scenario is in the green box. So if the broker has completed practices and the broker program, fundamentals is completed, but practices and the broker program are not completed, then the broker would be downgraded into the graduated licensing program into level 2. And once they complete the practices course and exam, they would have an unrestricted license issued. And then once they complete the broker program and exam, they would be back in a position that they would get an associate broker license issued, and they could apply to have their broker's license put back in place again. The third scenario is if they've completed fundamentals and practices, but they've not completed the broker's program. So in this case, they would not be going into the graduated licensing program, but their license would be downgraded to the associate level. And then they would have to complete the broker program course and exam. And once they've done that, they would get an unrestricted associate broker license and could reapply to move back into the broker position. So that's that's where brokers stand. Now, associate brokers, when we issued the conditional licenses back close to 2 years ago, everybody had to submit information on their background and experience, and then they were given a license at what was considered the appropriate level based on that experience that they provided. So there were many people that were given an associate broker's license that they really didn't, it's not that they didn't want it or they didn't apply for it. Actually, it was just given to them based on the information they provided. So over the last year and a half, we've had a number of associate brokers contact us and just say, look, I don't need an associate broker's license, just an associate license. And so their license has been changed. So what will happen coming up to October 1st, if there's still an associate broker at the end of September, but they haven't finished or completed the broker program course and exam, then their license would be downgraded to an associate. So for some people, that'll be fine because that's all they were interested in having anyways. And for other people, if they want to have an associate broker license, they just simply have to complete the broker program course and exam at some time. Doesn't matter if it's not, in this case, if it's not completed by the end of September, if they complete it in November, December, or June of next year, when they complete the course and exam, then their license would be automatically upgraded back to associate broker. So for associate brokers, there's 3 different scenarios as well. So if they have no courses completed, it would be the same as the broker. They would enter into level 1 of graduated licensing with a restricted license. They would have to complete fundamentals course and exam, then go into level 2, complete practices course and exam, and then they would have an unrestricted associate level license. And then at whatever point they complete the broker program and exam, they would be able to reinstate an associate broker's license. For those people, and I'm speaking in the green box now, they've completed fundamentals, but they have not completed practices and the broker program, they would have their license changed from being an associate broker downgraded to a restricted associate level license in the level 2 of the graduated program. And then once they've completed the practices course and exam, they would be given an unrestricted associate level license. And should they choose to get their associate broker license back, then they would complete the broker program and exam. And once they did that, then their exam or their license status would be upgraded to associate broker. And lastly, if they've completed fundamentals and practices, but not the broker program, their license would be, they would not go into the graduated licensing program, but their license would be downgraded to associate level. And then once they complete the course and exam for the broker program, they would get an unrestricted associate broker license. And then the last scenario or situation is for associates. So any associates that as of September 30th still have conditions on their license, there's 3 scenarios again. The first one is simply not renew as of October 1st and spend the time they need to complete whatever courses and exams are outstanding and then reapply for their license. And they'd get an unrestricted associate level license and could work without any restrictions. In the second scenario, in the green box, they have no courses completed. So they don't have fundamentals or practices completed. So they would be downgraded from an associate broker license on September 30th to a graduated associate license with restrictions on it as of October 1st, and they would be at the level 1 if they have no courses completed. And then once they complete fundamentals course exam, they would get or move into the level 2 of the restricted licenses. And once they complete practices, then they would have an unrestricted associate license, so they'd be done. Lastly, if they have fundamentals completed, but practices is not completed, they would go on September 30th from an associate unrestricted to an associate on October 1st with a restricted license at the level 2 of the graduated licensing process until they complete the practices course and exam. And then once they do that, they would get an unrestricted license issued. So the industry council, when looking at this, we're trying to look at it. People will have had close to 2 years to complete the requirements, and if they haven't completed the requirements, there were concerns. If the deadline was just simply extended, do we just keep bouncing this forward and have some people never really reach the goal line? So this was looked at as a way that they can continue to work, but with a restricted license, and there would be more incentive for them to complete the requirements to get an unrestricted license to be able to fully practice. Now, for the relicensing, as you all know, it's all done through the RECA system. So the system is in the process of being reprogrammed, and what will happen is these different scenarios are being programmed into the system so that it's going to be really easy for people who have completed all the conditions on their license as of September 30th. They will just renew as a normal renewal, so there won't be any issues at all. But if people still have outstanding conditions, depending on what conditions they have, they will see a different set of questions and responses that have to be dealt with as part of the renewal. And the broker also will see a different set of questions and responses that they have to deal with. So people will be sliding into that are currently licensed fully with condition licenses will be sliding into either graduated licensing level 1 or graduated licensing level 2, and the appropriate information will come up. So when that happens, the licensee is renewing, they're going to get asked questions to acknowledge that their license is now restricted and agreeing to it being downgraded, and that they'll abide by the restrictions. Then once the licensee has signed off on their part of the renewal process and it goes to the broker will have those things come to them, and the broker will have to sign off and acknowledge that the person renewing has a graduated license, not an unrestricted license, but a graduated license, whether it be at level 1 or level 2, and that the broker agrees to that and understands that's what's happening, and that they will ensure that the proper supervision is taking place while that person still has a graduated license. So we're hoping this will go smoothly, and if all the automated pieces fitting together work well. I expect they will. There's a lot of work that's gone into this and testing. So if people will just follow the sort of the bouncing ball where they go through the renewal process, they shouldn't see any big issues with it. Now, I'm done with the formal part of what I have, and I'll be happy to answer questions. But you get this information on the RECA website, the overview. We'll be posting, I believe we'll be posting this webinar as well once it's been processed and put on the website. So, but the information is, if you go to RECA.ca, and what you see on the right side of the screen is the page for Condo Manager licensing, and it has drop downs for the graduated licensing program You have access to those tables that for the level 1 and level 2 through this page on the website. And there's also a drop down, as you can see, for graduated and conditional licensing frequently asked questions. And then there's more information about courses and exams. So if you run into a problem or have specific questions, I'm happy to help out. My phone number is there. It's my direct line and my email address. I would much rather you contact me and let me help you through whatever you might not be clear on or what you're struggling with earlier on, rather than it be something that we're dealing with in the last week or 10 days of September when our world goes crazy. So, so please don't be shy about reaching out. So now I'm going to move into any questions that people have, and I'll drop this part of the screen here. I'll stop sharing, and we can deal with specific questions.
I can read them out to you, Doug, or there's about 8 in the queue right now.
Okay.
So the first one was, how will a broker know if a person already tried the graduated license but did not complete it and therefore can't do it now when hiring a person in the future?
I can actually answer that question, Doug, if you'd like.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we talked about that scenario. Hi, everyone. I'm Shauna Risden, the Registration Services Manager. A broker, when they're adding a licensee to their brokerage, if the person is eligible for graduated licensing, they will be informed of that when they select the individual. If the person is not eligible for graduated licensing, the broker just simply will not be able to add the individual to the brokerage.
So it'll be intuitive right on the RECA process.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is, can an unlicensed person run a board meeting?
The answer is no.
And that would be detailed in that sheet.
That's in the activities tables.
Yep. Can we get a definition of supervise? What is deemed appropriate supervision? There's several questions to that effect. So
we would consider a broker responsible that they don't have a person carrying out activities that they're not qualified for, that they've had no experience in. So if you've spent time, if a broker or a delegate has spent time with an individual in the graduated licensing program, working with them on whatever the activity is that requires supervision, and you're going to have very different people coming into the system. So you're going to have somebody who's never done any kind of property management in their life. So they're going to require a higher level of supervision by the broker to see that they're doing things properly. Whereas you could have somebody that's transferring over from regular property management into condominium management, and a portion of what goes on in condominium management is transferable skills and the people skills. But again, it's up to the broker to decide how much supervision that person needs for activities that are in the supervised category specifically. Now, keep in mind that a broker's responsible overall for supervising all the activities of a brokerage, regardless of whether it's graduated licensing, fully licensed condo managers, or administrative staff. So this is just saying that when you have somebody in a graduated program and they're in level 1, for instance, then you just have to be careful that they're not carrying out activities that require supervision until they've done that activity supervised a number of times to the point that the broker is comfortable that they know what they're doing in that area, and then you may not require them to be supervised for that specific activity. Keep in mind, we are not at your offices as RECA staff, but where the problem comes up, the issues come up, is when there's complaints. So if we're receiving complaints from members of boards of directors or unit owners about somebody doing activities, and it's discovered that the activities they're doing are ones that are restricted activities under the graduated licensing, and they're not doing it supervised, then it's the broker that's going to get held responsible as well in that situation.
The next question was, why is this program not available now? It looks like everything is in place to make this live and we need condo managers now.
It was considered by the industry council that we didn't want to mix this whole conditional, as we're coming to the end of the conditional licensing, with the graduated licensing program. And it may appear that everything is ready now, but I can assure you that there's still programming happening, still testing happening to make sure that this works properly come when the licensing or the graduated licensing is put in place for October 1st. So we've got the framework, we've got the information around the levels and the activities and all that portion of it's ready to go. But the portion on the actual technical side still has some work to happen.
Okay, great. Next question is, will there be licensing fees for the restricted license each year until the person gets their unrestricted license?
The licensing fees are the same regardless of license level. So all licensing fees for associates at any instance in any industry, as well as associate brokers and brokers, it's uniform throughout. So the fee won't change.
So the next two questions are in regards to the supervision. I think you've already answered them, but I'll just read them out. What does the supervision look like? For example, does a level 2 have to have a delegate at the AGM with them?
Yes. Again, some of these questions are ones that if you go to the activity sheets for level 1 and level 2, you'll see what's specified as to what they can do. They can, for instance, for an AGM, a person with a graduate licensing can participate and can help carry out some functions, things like registration at the beginning of the meeting and dealing with proxies and stuff like that. But they can't be advising anybody at the AGM or actually helping run the AGM. There has to be a fully qualified condo manager doing that.
And to the same effect, another licensed condo manager, can they supervise, or would this be the responsibility of the broker?
So the broker has the ability to delegate other condo managers that are not on restricted licenses. So if they're an associate or an associate broker and they have an unrestricted license, and the broker determines that that person is qualified and is a good person to supervise or mentor somebody in the graduated licensing program, then that's up to the broker to make that decision.
The next one's just a comment. I thought I'd read it out loud. I really appreciate the work RECA has done in putting the graduated program in place. Great job. The next question is, I have completed my first 2 courses, but was not successful with the broker course. What is my option now?
Can I jump in, Doug?
Well,
Yes,
it depends on what level license the person has.
Yeah. What is the license class that you hold? If you're a broker, you have to have the broker program completed in order to renew. If you're an associate broker, your license class will drop to associate, and that will be facilitated through the renewal application.
You good with that one, Doug? Anything to add?
Nope.
Okay. Next question, can you clarify that if we would like to follow the graduated licensing program, we will be able to pay for the individual exams as we progress?
Yes, so what will happen is, let's start from scratch with a person applying into the graduated licensing program. So they would apply for the eligibility and pay the eligibility application fee. They would have to do their criminal record check and pay for that. And then they would be provided with a restricted associate condo manager license. And they would then, sometime in that first year, they would have to register and pay for the fundamentals course with a third-party provider. Excuse me. And then once they've completed the course, that third-party provider would notify RECA that the person has completed the course, and then they would be eligible to write the exam. So when they make application to write the exam, they would pay the exam fee at that time. And then the same thing would go on for level 2. Once they get into once they have a level 2 license, they would then have that 12 months to complete the practices course. And so again, they would be paying for the course with the third-party provider when they register for the course, and then they would not pay for the exam until they've successfully completed the course, and we've been notified by the third-party provider that they have completed the course. Then they could then make application for the exam writing, and they would pay for the exam at that time. So it spreads all those expenses for the courses and the exams over. Conceivably, it could take over a 2-year period for them to complete the whole program. I suspect there's going to be a lot of brokers that will be encouraging people in graduated licensing to move along a bit quicker than taking the full 2 years, so that they can make full use of them, because it's limited. It does limit what they can do. And you as brokers, I'm sure, want them to be as fully functional as soon as possible. So I'm guessing, or I'm maybe predicting, what will happen is it may take a little longer for level 1s to get dealt with. But once people have determined that, yes, they like the job, they like the industry, and they're going to stay with it, then I suspect they will want to get the rest of their requirements completed as quickly as possible, so they can operate fully independently as a condo manager and not have to work under a restricted supervised license.
Okay, next question is, do you need to retake the course if you have completed it, just not passed the exam in time, or do you need to re-sign up for the course material again?
Well, for fundamentals and for broker program, those courses are set up that you can have 2 writings. So you can do as many practice exams as you like. There's no restriction on that. If you want to, pay for more than 1 practice exam, that's up to the individual. But there's only 2 writings allowed for fundamentals and for the broker program. If you don't complete successfully in those 2 writings, then you have to retake the course, whether through the same provider or another provider, but you have to retake the course before you can rewrite. And that's been a RECA policy for probably close to 15 years, I'm guessing. But there was an exception made on the practices of condominium management, in that when a person completes the practices of condominium management course, they can write, and if they fail the exam, they would pay for the exam for the first writing, and if they fail that writing, they can write the exam up to 3 more times at no cost. So that's a special circumstance around the practices because of the way we brought people into the industry as a regulated industry. I strongly suggest that people review the competencies before you write an exam, the practices exam or the broker program exam. I've been talking to a lot of brokers. I'm trying to follow up with as many as I can that haven't completed, and I've been providing the brokers with the list of competencies because the courses, take the practices course for example, there's 4 or 5 different providers of the practices course. Each one of them built their own course, but they had to meet the requirement that the course covered all the competencies listed in the document that they had to agree to in order to be a recognized course provider. And then the exams pull their questions from all those same competencies. So every question on the exams can be tied back to one of the competencies for the practices course, and the same for the broker program. So if you have trouble finding the competencies they're on our website for both the practices and the broker program, by all means email me and I'm happy to send you the link to those. Another thing that's available that some people aren't aware of is that the registrar will consider an exam exemption for any of the 3 exams, fundamentals, practices, or broker program, based on if you have been in the industry typically for 15 plus years and you have extensive experience in various types of condo management, then in all likelihood, registrar would approve an exam exemption for one or more exams. So if the requirement is that you have to complete the course. So once you've completed the course, if you've been granted an exam exemption, then the system, or the Shauna's staff in registration will sort of flip the switch on that person and remove the condition from their license. So if there's brokers out there that, for instance, just have the broker program to complete, and you have extensive experience in the industry, and you would prefer to request an exemption rather than write the exam, that option is open to you. And again, the exemption request form is on our website, or you can just pop me an email and I'm happy to send you a link to it. But those are things that may help. The competencies and also the exemption request are things that might help people get tidied up and finished before the deadline comes.
I just wanted to add one additional thing. If you have completed the course, or you're in the midst of the course and you have not yet written the exam, and you downgrade into a graduated license through renewal, your course will not expire. RECA doesn't set or enforce course expiry or program expiry dates. That would be up to your third-party course provider.
Next question. Christina.
Okay. If I complete the fundamental and the practice of condo management after October 1st, will I be able to hold board meetings and AGMs?
Well, if a person has completed fundamentals and practices, they're licensed as an associate. And again, it's up to the broker at that point. You know, are they satisfied for that new associate to get thrown to the wolves at a board meeting? That will be between the broker, because they're going to be an unrestricted associate at that point, and it's up to the broker to decide what they're going to allow that associate to do or not do, and going out and working with boards.
And next question, you note making this a trial system for licensees starting with condo management. What kind of timeline do you think we can expect before we see something similar approved to come through for property managers?
I can't give you anything concrete on that. Just I can tell you from my involvement with the industry council that they have committed to putting the graduated licensing program in place for the condominium management industry for the 1 year. The 1 year, it's not a sunset clause. It's just that they have put in their minutes basically that they will revisit when we get up close to a year to see if there's any tweaking or changes, updating, whatever it might be, to the condo management graduated licensing program. And if the program has been seen as successful, then they very much understand that the same issue, the same shortage of people exists in the property management industry. And they would look at applying it to that. Now, it might happen sooner. I mean, after we have this in place for 6 months, everything might be sailing along quite smoothly, and we might be getting very positive feedback from brokers. So we will be reaching out to condominium management brokerages to see what you're experiencing with the graduated licensing and what you think, and is it do what it's hopefully intended to do? Do you have suggestions for changes? And so the industry council might choose to move faster than waiting a year to decide whether or not it gets applied to other industries. There's been some talk even of some of the different categories in real estate besides property management that might show an interest in this. But we would have to go through the same process if we were going to do that for property management that we have with condo management, which would be putting together a group of property managers along with representation from staff and the industry council to work through the whole process to see to create that whole sort of activities level 1, level 2 type program that we have for condo managers. We'd have to do similar work for property management to see what would be applicable in that industry. So it would take a while to go through that process and get it vetted, because one of the things we did with the condo manager is we took what we were proposing out to a number of very experienced condo manager brokerages or brokers and had them give us feedback and then tweak things before the industry council made their final decisions. So that's a process we would have to go through for property management as well. You are encouraged, though, that if you, seeing how this rolls out, if you think that this is something that would be very applicable to property management as well, by all means, send in either directly to RECA or to the industry council your comments and suggestions, and it may move things along quicker.
I'll just take a moment. There's about 3 or 4 more questions, and I know there's a couple questions that were put into the chat as well. I did post, I think the biggest one that everyone's looking for is the link to the task lists of what you can do as a level 1 or level 2 graduated licensee. So that's in the chat. And then I also linked to the competencies that Doug was talking about, both for an associate and a broker. Somebody's asking for, what was the link for the exam exemption? I don't think there's a link for that, right, Shauna?
Yeah,
There
is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it's
I'll
under
look-
the. I think
I
it's
can
under
post
condo management frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so there's a question here from Charles in the chat. Is there a list of what a licensed associate can do? There is, and that's the task list there that I've thrown in the chat.
Yeah, those lists are a licensed associate that has a restricted license under the graduated licensing program.
The next question in the Q&A is, the university courses, fundamentals and practice, expire September 30th, 2023. Will the university automatically extend the courses, or will the person with a graduated license have to pay for the course again?
I can't speak to that. That's really going to be it.
Expiry dates on courses. If you see an expiry date on your course in your MyRECA account, email registration@reca.ca and we'll look into that and likely remove the expiry date.
Okay, thank you.
Next question is, I was granted a broker license without the test after completing the course. Are you saying that I now have to take the test?
No, not at all. If you were granted an exemption. Sorry, am I misunderstanding?
So let me.
That's how I read it too, Doug. Yeah, if you were granted an exemption from the exam, you do not have to complete the exam. Your course has already been updated to indicate that you're exempt from the exam. No one else has been exempted from the exam just by default. You had to have made the request and had it approved.
So once it's approved and the course is in our system, the third-party course provider has indicated that you have completed that course. As I mentioned earlier, the registration staff will see that and they will change your status, and the condition for that course and exam gets removed from your license.
Yeah, I'll just mention as well that on your licensing tab in your MyRECA account for all condo managers, you can see the status of your courses, whether it's in progress or it's been passed. You can also go to your license certificate and look at the conditions that are actually on your license. And if you see anything that doesn't align with what you expect to see, again, you can email registration@reca.ca and we can certainly take a look into it for you.
Okay, next questions is, if we are in the process of taking both courses and plan to complete before September 30th, are we able to take the exam in 2 parts?
Well, they're 2 separate exams, one exam for each course. So you're eligible once the third-party course provider has indicated or notified RECA that you've completed the course. So if you had 2 on the go and you've completed both of them, then they would indicate to us that you've completed them, and then you'd be eligible for each of the exams. And you could register for both exams if you chose, have them both and write one
We cannot hear anything. Not sure if I'm the only
One day
one.
and what?
There's no audio, Doug.
Things got frozen.
Sorry, everyone. I believe our meeting was scheduled to end at noon, and so it just auto kicked us all off. But I think we're all back.
Majority are.
Yeah. There we go. There was the man I was looking for. Okay.
I wanted to add one other thing there, and sorry, Doug, I don't think we caught the end of what you were saying, so feel free to jump back in. I just wanted to mention that if you renew your license and you haven't completed your courses and you still have outstanding conditions, you would have a renewed future license as a graduated licensee. However, between the date you renew and October 1st, when that license would come into effect, if you in fact complete your course and exam, your renewed license will be upgraded to reflect that. So it's entirely possible that you go through the renewal process, downgrade your license. By the time October 1st rolls around, you may no longer have a graduated license if you've completed all the outstanding courses related to the conditions on your license. Communication will go out both to the licensee and the broker in the event that the future renewed license is upgraded, just so there's no surprises on October 1st.
Thanks, Shauna.
Okay, I got a couple more questions coming in here, so we'll try to answer them real quick. As someone who came from another regulated industry, I really suggest you keep a graduated licensing program in place because it helps new people enter the industry. I happen to know that there are brokerages out there that have not registered their staff as associated with RECA because the new staff members would not be able to pass the exam until they have at least a year of experience. I guess that's more of a comment.
Yep.
Not specifically course related, but I'm wondering how long do AKA or name changes typically take? All required documentation was provided. However, I've been waiting months and months for approval.
That sounds very unusual.
Yeah, I would suggest whoever made that comment, please email registration@reca.ca and we can look into it. Normally our turnaround time at this time is about 5 days for submitted requests such as those.
And it's usually, if it's a straightforward AKA, there's usually no big delay or complications doing it. I mean, if it's Robert wanting an AKA as Bob or that type of thing, they don't require any work on our part, really. It's that's clearly a derivative of that person's legal name. It's the ones that might take a little more time or some to and fro would be if it's a name that doesn't appear to be related at all to your legal name, and then there's more information required. Next.
So there's one last question here in the Q&A, and then I'll move over to the chat real quick. With condo managers who have more than 10 years experience, are we able to be exempted from one or both exams, either the fundamental or practice?
This is very much by an individual case as to what the registrar will consider for experience. We're looking at years of experience, and the rule of thumb to date has been approximately 15 years experience in the industry, and well-rounded experience with different types of condominium complexes and operations. So you have nothing to lose, though, if you've got 10 plus years experience and it's been very wide ranging in what you've dealt with to do that. So we also look at, and I'm speaking as an old white-haired guy, we also look at, how long has that person been out of school as well? And because we clearly understand that if you haven't written an exam or taken a course, it can cause a lot, not so much the course, but when you're doing a course like this for an exam, it can cause a lot of angst if you've been 20, 30, 40 years away from school. And so that's also been one of the considerations. So so if you have lots of experience, and you've been out of school for a long period of time, I would suggest that if you want to try for an exemption, you've got nothing to lose by putting it in, and it'll either be approved or denied. So.
Okay, just a couple last questions here that were put into the chat. Is there a report we can get that shows who's got remaining conditions at our brokerage?
Shauna, do you want to speak to that?
Doug's waiting for me and I'm thinking. I don't think there's a quick, easy report. I can talk to our programmer to see if we can put something together. I know that as a broker, you can go and look at the license certificate of each of your registrants, and that certificate will show you if there are active conditions still on it.
And also, if you want a summary, you can email me. I've actually is something I've been doing over the last couple of weeks to actually see where all the brokerages are at, and the brokers are at with their completion. I've developed a spreadsheet that I have every condominium management brokerage and their staff on it, and what their requirements, outstanding requirements are, and what they've completed. So I'd be more than happy to cut and paste out of my document that I'm working with your brokerage. If you would like to see a snapshot of what your whole brokerage looks like, then just email me at ddixon@reca.ca and I'll send that to you.
And if we're able to develop a report, we'll communicate that out to this group.
Thanks, Shauna.
I did the broker challenge and passed. That means I am good, right?
Yes, if somebody challenged any of the 3 exams for condominium management and they passed the challenge, then there's no requirement to do the course or do anything further.
Yeah, double check that on your licensing tab in your MyRECA account. Make sure that that course is showing as completed. Check the conditions on your license. Make sure the condition related to that course has been removed. If you see something unexpected, again, email us at registration@reca.ca and we can certainly investigate.
So the last one, I don't know if this is just a comment. Board members are not licensed, but they run the meetings. That's in the chat. Was that just a comment from someone? Yeah.
Well, a board has the ability under the legislation and their structure to run their own business. I mean, the condo corporation essentially is a legislated business, and they have a governance process in place. So RECA doesn't have any say or doesn't regulate in any way what condo corporations or board of directors does. They're completely exempt from licensing. But if a third party is providing services to that board and that corporation, then that's a different case. Legislation requires that person be licensed appropriately.
Thanks, Doug. And just the last question, I think this was we got cut off. I think you were trying to answer this question, but I'm going to repeat it. For those of us that have been in the industry for 15 plus years and paid for the courses and exams and already have their license, is RECA going to reimburse us for our expenses now that you have changed the requirements?
Well, there's been no change to the requirement for people to complete courses. The only change that there was the industry council in discussions with the registrar decided that they would look at people with extensive experience and see if they would qualify for an exemption under the legislation that the registrar's authority has. I'm not aware that there would be any reimbursement at all. This has been a huge project for over 2 years now in trying to get everybody licensed. As most people know, there have been several delays and changes that have taken place in order to accommodate people, that partly because of what was happening with COVID and the work that was delayed because of COVID, and that catch up happened. There's been just so many different things that have taken place in the last 2.5 years that one of the options they looked at to try to be fair to people who have been in the industry a long time and haven't been in school for a very long time to deal with the whole issue of the trepidation of doing exams. That was a decision of the registrar. So it has nothing to do with whether or not people pay for courses and exams.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that one was captured. There's no further questions that I see unless someone wants to take themselves off mute and ask a question or put their last question in the chat real quick. I think
And I'll just
we're-
remind people that I'm available to call or to pop an email to. Like I said, we'd like to be proactive and help you through this process as you're going through it, rather than run into hiccups mid or late September or into October. And encourage you to encourage your people at your brokerages to get as much done as they can before September 30th, so that they don't get into these issues around having licenses downgraded and having to work under a graduated licensing program.
Thanks, Doug.
Any questions from the floor? From anybody? See lots of familiar faces, so I hope all is going well and you're having a good summer. And do reach out if you need help. Thanks very much for attending. Bye-bye now.